Let's get a word on the big stories. Brendan O'Neill is chief political writer at Spiked Online. Brendan, afternoon to you.
Hey, Ian, how you doing?
Very good, thank you. Nice to have you with us. We've been hearing these horrendous details of the Southport killer. I'm really going to repeat what I've been saying throughout the first hour of the programme, Brendan. You know, we knew this was already a horrific attack that had taken place. I don't think any of us in our wildest nightmares could have imagined it was quite as bad as we are hearing. It's possible that the killer won't even be there for the sentencing. He was removed from court just before they broke for lunch. But it certainly throws up all manner of questions about our criminal justice system, about the openness of our leaders, etc. And of course, you know, how this man or what justice even looks like for a killing spree as horrific as this.
Yeah, truly horrific. An act of just evil. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. It was an act of evil. It was an extremely nihilistic assault, not only on those young girls, but on Britain itself. I mean, one of the prosecutors said this was an attempt to strike fear into the country, and that is what it did. People were horrified and terrified that this kind of violence could happen in Britain. As you say, it raises all sorts of questions. I really dislike the way that he's being referred to as the Amazon killer because he got a knife from Amazon. Look, there might be questions to be answered about how easy it is to buy a knife, maybe, but that is such a deflection from what we really need to be talking about, which is there were at least 15 opportunities, according to the Times, when he could have been stopped. He was referred to prevent 3 times. It was known that he was carrying knives. It was known that he had a fascination with the death of children. We know that his father tried to stop him from carrying out an act of violence at his old school. People knew this. And the criminal justice system, the police and the education system didn't do what I think they should have done. So, you know, this act of evil is on him and him alone. But it does seem, the more we hear, it does seem that he was ever so slightly aided and abetted by a failing state and by a state that has retreated from its responsibility to keep citizens safe.
Yeah, and it's the same kind of script, isn't it, that follows these horrific attacks. You know, we often see it. We've seen it quite recently with a child that has died as a result of abuse at home, and then you discover, you know, the doctor knew something, the social services knew something, the police had turned up 100 times at the house, and you know, anyone in the neighbourhood could have said, you know, this is a really challenging household. Everybody knew, nobody joined the dots, you know, and then you get that horrendous vacuous platitude from politicians, you know, lessons will be learned.
You know, a lot of these things, you know, I'm not really a tub-thumping law and order type. I don't think fear of crime is always a useful response. I do think we have to approach things in a very cool way and a very careful way and make sure that people are safe and not fearful. That's what an ideal society should look like. Yeah. However, there do seem to be a growing number of cases where it's not only a criminal act by an individual or an evil act by an individual, but it also seems that that act was made more possible by the failings of the state and by the failings of society more broadly. The killings of children by neglectful parents, as you say, the rape gang scandal, which everyone has been talking about for the past few weeks, the Southport stabbings, of course, all of these things, there are huge questions to be answered as to why officialdom didn't clock a problem sooner. Yeah. And I think it speaks to a corrosion of the state and its sense of duty and its sense of coherence. It also probably speaks to a corrosion of social bonds. Why aren't we looking out for each other a bit more? Why aren't we keeping an eye on that crazy neighbor or those problematic parents? Why aren't we taking more action? Why are we now more likely to film an assault if we see it in the street rather than intervene and try to stop it from happening? I think there is a tearing of the social network, the social fabric itself, which probably is making criminal activity worse than it would otherwise have been. Yeah,
and there is a line, of course, where people will argue, not unreasonably, look, if somebody is really mad and determined to kill somebody or do horrendous damage, they can, and there's no law of the land or initiative that you can really put in place that could stop a determined killer, a psychopathic killer, in their tracks. But that's not really what we're talking about here with this character, because there were, you know, we did know who he was. You know, we literally had almost a textbook, as you rightly said, Brendan, 10 opportunities or more to catch this guy or stop this guy, and we didn't do it. So the system was in place, but the manifestation of that system was woefully inadequate and lethally inadequate.
You're absolutely right. You know, however much we would like to stop people from being evil so-and-sos, you're never going to be able to do that across the board. There is always going to be a Dennis Nielsen, a Fred and Rose West, a Moors murderers. Those people, sadly, are going to be out there. Everything should be done to catch them sooner rather than later. But sometimes that stuff can't be stopped. That's the tragic truth. But in this case, and also in the case of the rape gangs, which, let's not forget, didn't only involve pimping and rape, but also killing. Some of those girls were killed. Yeah. And in some of these more recent cases, the situation is that people kind of knew what was going on, or they certainly knew that this individual was a problem, that this individual in Southport had problematic ideas and strange ideas and a fascination with knives. Things were known, and action was not taken. And I just think we live under a state at the moment which is obsessed with telling us how to behave. Don't eat this, don't smoke too close to the pub entrance, don't raise your kids this way. They lecture us all the time and wag their fingers at us all the time, but they don't do the stuff they should be doing, which is keeping us safe from crazy people, keeping us safe from crime. We live under a state that does too much of what it shouldn't be doing and not of what it should be doing.
Yeah, it wants to make sure our kids clean their teeth. But the stabbing stuff, they're a little more relaxed about, it seems. I mean, it's curious to even put it that way. Let's move to another story, Brendan. I mean, who'd have thought this, by the way? Is it possible that Rachel Reeves has gone from zero to hero over net zero? Because we're looking at this curious situation where she says boosting the UK economy must trump Labour's dash for net zero as she pushes for new growth. That could include the third runway, all sorts of other issues. Could be a mighty fallout. I mean, this could be a really big fallout, unless they're going to choreograph and do this behind the scenes. But it looks as if she is monumentally at odds as Chancellor with the man, the evangelist that is charged with making us safe and prolonging the longevity of planet Earth, Ed Miliband.
You know, I like what she's saying, because I think net zero is a destructive policy. If you look at it in detail, it will cost billions. It won't really do anything to lower global emissions, because all it fundamentally means is that we won't dig for our own oil and gas in the UK, and we'll have to import it from somewhere else, which actually can increase emissions because these things are not always dug so cleanly in other countries. And then, of course, there is the transport impact as well. So net zero won't really help the planet. It will dent the exchequer. It will put a hole in the pockets of ordinary Brits as well. I think it's a destructive, almost suicidal policy for the country. So I like the fact that she says economic growth is more important. I'm not sure I believe that she's going to go along with that. I'm not sure I think she will follow through, because the Labour government is deeply wedded to the net zero idea at a really fundamental level. And where is the evidence that she's pursuing serious economic growth? The third runway at Heathrow, great, that will create jobs, it will expand Heathrow's capacity, that's important. But where is the real growth, the reintroduction of a proper industrial technological mindset into the government? We haven't seen that yet, and we need that.
And they keep saying it, of course. I've lost count of how many, between the phrase smash the gangs and grow the economy, I mean, they're vying for sort of first place in the league of interesting things this government comes out to. I've not seen any evidence of either, by the way, and certainly on the economy, which is absolutely imperative. There's almost nothing, I think, so far. I mean, the house building, they're halfway through their first year in government, so in theory, we should have, 75,000 houses built so far. I don't think that's been achieved or anywhere near.
No, this is a government that's very good at sloganeering, very good at posturing, very good at coming up with one-liners. Actually, not that good at one-liners, but, you know, they repeat ones that they come up with all the time. But not so good at following through, not so good at making good on their slogans, such as smash the gangs. You know, we're still having people turning up on our shores every single day. Not so good at economic growth. You know, they keep saying grow, 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 but what are they actually doing? And if they were serious, they would be building 1 million new homes a year. I mean, that is literally what we need for the next 5 years in order to house people comfortably in this country. They would be getting serious about nuclear power, building new nuclear power stations. They would open those coal-fired stations that the last government wanted to open, and they would be digging for oil and gas in the North Sea in a much more determined way so that we can become an energy independent nation rather than being dependent on other countries that we might fall out with at some point in the future. That's what real growth would look like. It would create thousands upon thousands of well-paying jobs for working class people. It would improve our energy infrastructure. It would make energy cheaper, and it would make the country happier. Yeah. So a real growth agenda would not be a bad thing, but we have not seen it yet.
Not at all. Interesting one to finish on, Brendan. Supermarkets unite to back farmers' inheritance tax protest. Now, you could say they have skin in the game on this, and that's understandable, but very unusual nonetheless to see big companies come out and side on a political issue.
Yeah, it is. It is unusual, which suggests that you're right. They have skin in the game, and it suggests that they feel they will be hurt by this.
Yeah.
They feel that this is going to be as much a problem for them as it is for potentially for lots of farmers. And I think one of the Tesco spokespeople said, you know, this is about food security. And that's a really good point, because I think the government seems not to realize that these people who it's punishing with this inheritance tax hike, these are the people who make the food that keeps us alive. I mean, this is not some small fry industry that is insignificant and it wouldn't matter if it went out of business. This is an essential industry. These are hardworking men and women. They make the foodstuffs that we all eat every single day, and they do a wonderful job for this nation. They keep the nation ticking. And it really speaks to how aloof and out of touch the political class has become, that they think they can just attack even the farming industry, even the people who make the stuff they're eating while they're coming up with these dumb policies. Yeah. So I'm glad the supermarkets have got involved. I think there is definitely self-interest there, but it's a self-interest that could be beneficial politically, because I think it might give Labour pause for thought on this destructive policy.
Yeah, well, we're going to watch with interest, but we don't hold our breath, of course, because there's nothing like nothing governments like less than having to row back on something, even if it makes no sense in the first place. Brendan, thank you as ever. Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer, Spiked Online and author. Thank you to him.